We'll go ahead and call the meeting to order. Appreciate everybody coming out. December 18th, 2015, we're here at the DNR Auditorium in Salt Lake City. Appreciate everybody making the drive and appreciate everybody that's tuning in on the internet or however else you're watching. Have a fairly short agenda today. First thing we want to do though is go through and introduce our board. I'll start over on my left. First we have Steve Dalton from the southern region, Byron Bateman from the northern region, Calvin Crandall from the central region, Dr. Kirk Woodward from northeast region. I'm John Bair. I'm the chairman of the board and I'm also from the central region. To my right we have Donnie Hunter from the southern region and Dr. Mike King from the southeast region. Appreciate all the board members being here and helping out in the process. Also, we would like to acknowledge our executive secretary for the Wildlife Board. This is not a run-of-the-mill wildlife board, so he's not up here with us, but we have our director, Greg Sheehan, who is sitting over with our board coordinator, Stacy Coons. Is that your official title? All right. The princess of all, Stacy. And we have a new hand with us today, and it's Jamie Martell. Is that right? Jamie's new with us. She'll be helping out and helping make sure everything runs smooth. We appreciate her joining us. Also, we want to take just a few minutes and thank all our IT guys and everybody that's putting this together, making sure our sound and audio and our live feed and everything's running clear. We appreciate that very much. Well, we have the agenda. The agenda will go as follows. We'll first approve the agenda, then item number 2 will be the Expo permit distribution contract that we will go over, and we'll just kind of take it from there. Do we have a motion to approve the agenda?
So moved.
Moved by Calvin. Do I have a second? Donnie seconds. Any discussion? All in favor? Passes unanimous. Greg? Next up, we have one of our attorneys, Greg Hansen. He's going to give an explanation of the confidentiality and conflict of interest requirements and agreements, and we'll let him explain exactly what he's doing and go from there.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Like you said, my name is Greg Hansen. I'm with the Attorney General's Office and represent Wildlife Resources. I was asked today to provide maybe a brief introduction to the process that Division of Wildlife Resources has gone through, and then also specifically some of the restrictions and requirements you'll be expected to follow today in order to participate in the decision-making process. Utah Administrative Code R657-55 authorizes the Division of Wildlife Resources to issue the Wildlife Expo permit series to a qualified conservation organization subject to Wildlife Board approval. In going through the process to award a new contract, the Division of Wildlife Resources and the Utah Division of State Purchasing determined that that contract award process was subject to the Utah State Procurement Code. As my supervisor, Marty Bushman, described in our last board meeting on December 2nd, it was a pretty rigorous process that the division went through. We first posted a request for proposals on the State Purchasing's website. Proposals were received by State Purchasing over the past couple months and then evaluated by an evaluation committee that was made up of a pretty diverse membership. Our Assistant Director Mike Canning will give a little bit more detail on the evaluation committee and their decision-making process, but today your role will be to finalize the award of the contract. As part of this process, you are subject to a number of state laws, state requirements regarding confidentiality and conflict of interest. During your decision-making process, you will be presented with 4 different documents. 2 proposals that were submitted as part of the request for proposals process, a score summary sheet that describes the scoring process, and a justification statement that was prepared by the evaluation committee. The content of these materials remains protected right now. Mike Canning will describe the process that those materials become public and available to the public, but you'll be expected to sign a confidentiality statement that you will not disseminate, discuss, distribute, or otherwise use those materials outside of this board meeting. And those requirements remain in effect even after this board meeting closes. If you get requests for documents, please contact the division or Marty or myself, and we'll help you in addressing those requests. But in large part, any record requests or particular discussions need to be directed through either the Division of Wildlife Resources or the Division of State Purchasing. We have prepared a confidentiality statement that you will need to read and sign today before you receive any materials. Stacy, if you would distribute those forms.
It's good to see Stacy actually filling a purpose in the meeting. Oh, she'll get even. She'll get even.
And board members, if you would please read that form. If you have any questions, please let me know. And if you are willing and able to abide by the requirements in that form, please sign and Stacy will collect them. Stacy, while you collect those forms, if you'd also distribute the conflict of interest form at the same time. Okay, the second form that Stacy has distributed to you describes the conflict of interest requirements that are provided for in state law. There are a number of sources of state law on this topic, and each one of those are identified in the form provided to you. I'll provide a brief summary. The first relates to socialization requirements. And in summary, a board member may not participate in any social activities with applicants that would interfere with the objective performance of your duties today. Second, they may not participate in social activities with applicants that would appear to a reasonable person to undermine your professional independence, integrity, or impartiality. Lastly, you may not have any close personal relationships with any applicants, and I'll describe that a bit further in a second. But the second topic has to do with financial conflicts of interest. A board member may not have any personal financial interest in an applicant or the award of a contract. State rule describes that financial interest as a 10% ownership interest. Second, a board member may not have a family member who has a financial interest in the award of the contract. And lastly, you may not have any type of financial interest that could potentially influence your judgment in awarding the contract, such as any form of financial compensation, a contract with any of the applicants, or the like, as well as any entity who may be working for the applicant who has awarded the contract. So there's a socialization portion, there's a financial interest portion. However, professional relationships and social acquaintances are not prohibited, and so there's kind of a degree of social relationship that's allowable, and then there's you go past that point if that social relationship is so close that it would lead to some type of bias, impartiality, or an appearance of bias. Professional relationships are also allowed. As Marty had described during our December 2nd board meeting, we run into a situation where we have memberships in various conservation organizations. We've determined that mere membership alone is not a disqualifying factor to participating in today's decision-making process. However, if you have any type of financial interest in one of the applicants, or if you were in some form of a leadership role, an executive leadership role, or had substantial influence in the way that a conservation organization operated, you'd be expected to recuse yourself today. These standards are all lined out in the form provided to you. If you have any questions regarding conflicts of interest, please let me know. But those members that do have conflicts need to recuse themselves from today's board meeting. Those that do not have conflicts may sign the form and participate in the rest of the decision-making process. Do any members have questions?
Is this where we assume we know who the applicants are?
At this point, you do not know who the applicants are, but Mike Canning in the next phase of our board meeting today will distribute a list of applicants that you may review to determine whether you have conflicts or not. Okay.
So do we want to hold off on signing this until we know?
Until you know who the applicants
are.
Until
Mike has given us a list of applicants.
Don't know if you have a conflict at this point.
Okay.
Are there any questions? Okay. At this point, I'll hand it over to Ann Schleep and Mike Canning.
Okay. Thank you, sir. Mike, I know you've anxiously awaited this moment for a good long time, so.
Thank you. I'm Mike Canning. I'm an assistant director with the Division of Wildlife Resources. I'm going to provide to each of you a list of organizations that either submitted an application or may have a financial interest in the contract for the distribution of the Expo permits. As Greg mentioned, this list has not been publicly distributed, and in fact, the only people that are aware of this list, the contents of this list, are the 4 members of the Evaluation Committee and State Purchasing.
Now, when you distribute this, we're not to talk about it, or
yes,
it's still confidential?
I'll distribute it to you. If you have a conflict, please declare that conflict, but don't mention the names of any of the groups, and then recuse yourself.
Okay. Everybody had a chance to look over the list and look over the contract? Okay. Well, Mike, I guess I'll start it off. I think it would be for the best of the process and the meeting and the whole deal if I recuse myself. So I will, I guess I'm the chairman and we have a trustee vice chairman here. I'll go ahead and turn the meeting over to Dr. Woodward to run from this point out.
Okay.
And I'll have a seat over here by Stacy so I'm not in the way.
Yes, I'll be distributing some confidential information to those of you that do not have a conflict. So those of you that do, we ask you to please move down from the podium so that you don't see that confidential information.
So anybody else that has a conflict needs to move over to where Greg is sitting now.
Do we have to announce that we have a conflict and then move over? Okay.
That's enough. Just announce you have one and don't give any details.
Well, based on the list you just submitted, I'm going to recuse myself.
Myself as well. I need to recuse myself.
Do we have any other conflicts? Okay, please sign the conflict of interest form, those of you that do not have conflicts, and give that to Stacy.
One more time, Stacy. Those guys don't bite, Stacy.
Some light reading material.
Well, I've just given you each a packet of material that contains 4 documents. We received 2 proposals on our request for proposals for this contract. Each of those proposals is included. We'll refer to them today throughout the presentations and the discussion as Offeror A and Offeror B without using the names of the groups that actually submitted them. They're labeled as such in your packets, Offeror A and Offeror B. You also have the score sheet that our committee used to score the proposals. And I'll go in, when we get to my presentation after you've reviewed everything, I'll get into the details of how the scoring worked and what the criteria were. But you've got that. And then the last document is the justification statement. This is the document our committee wrote to justify our decisions. We gave you a score for each of the criteria and justified that score. You can go back and look in the proposals and review all that information. I also have a copy of the actual request for proposals. It's not in your packet, but I have them here. If any of you are interested in seeing the request for proposals, yes, I'll distribute that as well then. With that, we'll give you the time you need to review the documents, and when you're ready for us, let us know.
So we'll take that time now to review the documents. I think at this point, rather than giving a time limit, let's review and see where we're at here in 30 minutes. And if we need more time at that point, we'll go longer. Johnny. Okay, I think we'll call the meeting back to order. We've all had ample time to review. Now give the floor to Ann. I'm not going to try that last name, Ann. I'm going to let you tell us. Introduce yourself and confirm the state's purchasing and department's involvement in this.
My name is Ann Schleep.
Thank you.
From State Purchasing, and I was the purchasing agent assigned to this solicitation, the AS 16003. And I just want to confirm that the state purchasing laws and code and rule were observed through this whole process. And it was just my pleasure to work with the evaluation team members. They were very professional. And I'll turn the time now back to Mike Canning.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ann. Now that everyone on the board has had a chance to review the proposals and the justification statement, I will go through the process that we used, so everyone's familiar with that, and then announce who the committee recommends be the selected offerer. I thought I'd start with giving just a very brief history of the Expo permit series. Expo permits were established to attract a large wildlife expedition to Utah and also to raise money for wildlife conservation. Expo permits are permits for big game, bear, cougar, and turkey. There are up to 200 permits that can be allocated by the board each year, and each year it has been 200 so far, that can then be distributed by a conservation group at an expo. Permits cost $5 to apply for them, and members of the public can apply for them at the expo. We've had these permits since 2007, and the current contract is with the Mule Deer Foundation. That contract runs through 2016, and the Mule Deer Foundation currently partners with Sportsmen for Fish and Wildlife to distribute the permits, and they do so at the Western Hunting and Conservation Expo. So I'm here today to give a recommendation to the Wildlife Board for which conservation organizations should be approved to distribute the permits for 2017 to 2021. There have been some misunderstandings, so I just want to clarify. The Division of Wildlife Resources does not regulate which organizations can hold an expo in Utah. Anyone can do that. We're only talking about the decision on which group can distribute the expo permits today. As Ann mentioned, we followed the formal request for proposal process established by Utah Procurement Code. Proposals were scored on pre-established criteria by an impartial committee. I'll get into those in more detail in a few minutes. Today, the board may accept or reject the highest scoring proposal, but you may not select a lower scoring proposal. And after this meeting, DWR will negotiate a contract with the highest scoring organization if the board approves that organization today. Our evaluation committee, as we've mentioned, was directed by state purchasing. They assisted with the process, were there in the room with us, but they did not score proposals. I want to thank Ann Schleep and Mark Perry, both here from purchasing. They were very helpful. It's a complicated process, took us many months to work through, and we couldn't have done it without them. We had 4 members of the committee that actually scored proposals and voted. Representative from the governor's office, representative from the Department of Natural Resources Administration, representative from the Department of Technology Services, and those are the folks that run the computer share for the state of Utah, and then a representative from the Division of Wildlife Resources. There were 2 proposals that were submitted and fully evaluated by the committee. As I mentioned about a half an hour ago, for today's purposes, we're going to refer to them as the proposals were submitted by organizations Offerer A and Offerer B. The scoring criteria. These were all described in the request for proposals that's been out publicly for several months now. There should be no surprises here. The first criteria was Expo operations, and that was 20% of the total score. And that pertains to your experience planning and organizing a large-scale event, your plans for organizing this large-scale event, an expo in Utah, the number of applicants you think you may have, the number of attendees, the venue of your expo, the business organizations you may attract to be part of the expo, and those sorts of considerations. That's 20% of the score. The next item is 10% of the score, and that's economic considerations. And that focuses on your past performance marketing and advertising, large-scale events, and then also your plan to market and advertise the Expo here in Utah. And this also includes economic benefits to the state of Utah. That's an important criteria here is what are you going to provide to the state. The third item, promotion of hunting, fishing, and trapping in Utah. That's also 10% of the score. And that's really what are you going to provide to benefit the future of the sports we all love. How are you going to provide for recruitment and retention? What are you going to provide for sportsmen at the Expo? This also includes how much floor space will you donate for things like National Archery in the Schools program, the Help Stop Poaching Trail, or other division outreach programs. The ability to organize and conduct a secure and fair permit drawing, 20% of the total score. This one's extremely important, especially now with all the issues we're having with data security. This includes the data security of maintaining all the records of applicants that apply for these permits, but it also includes being able to have a fair drawing that we can audit and ensure that it's fair to everyone that applied. And a third important component of this is to ensure that the credit card transactions when you're applying for an Expo are all done with what's called PCI compliance, industry standards, so that we have no concerns with credit card numbers being stolen or fraud or that sort of thing. The fifth component is the largest. It's 30% of the total score, and it's the commitment to use the revenue generated for wildlife conservation in Utah. So as I mentioned, to apply, it's a $5 application fee. By rule, $1.50 of those $5 must be used by the organization on projects to benefit wildlife, and those projects must be approved by the Division of Wildlife Resources. And this category really gets at what is your proposed use of the remaining $3.50. The sixth item is the historical contribution and previous performance of the organization in Utah. That's 10%. I think that one's pretty self-explanatory. What have these organizations done in Utah to benefit sportsmen and wildlife? Final scores, after our committee went through and evaluated everything, Offeror A had a score of 435 out of 500, and Offeror B had a score of 387.5 out of 500. And I want to be really clear here for the benefit of the board, the people here in attendance, people watching on YouTube. The judgment of the 4 members of the evaluation committee, it was clear that Proposal A was superior to Proposal B. No doubt in that judgment. We know that people in the state feel very strongly about wildlife, the Expo, and conservation organizations. There's been a lot of talk, both online and other places, urging the selection of one conservation group or another. And I just like folks to know that this process is not a popularity contest. It cannot be a popularity contest. The evaluations were done based on the criteria that were published, and a proposal that met those criteria fully, addressed all aspects of those criteria, and justified their statements, received a higher score than a proposal that did not address all aspects of each criteria and not justify all statements fully. Each proposal had its strengths and weaknesses, but overall, our committee was in full agreement. The proposal from Offeror A was superior to the proposal from Offeror B. So after careful consideration of the proposals and the pre-established criteria, the evaluation committee recommends that the contract to distribute Expo Permit Series be awarded to Offeror A, which is Sportsmen for Fish and Wildlife. With that, I thank you, and I'll turn the time back over to Greg Hansen. He has some advice on the types of issues you can discuss here in this meeting.
Thank you, Mike. Just want to briefly describe how the procurement code applies to board discussion and analysis of the recommendation that comes from the evaluation committee. As Mike has described in the past, the board is acting as a procurement unit head under state purchasing code, and as such, your authority is pretty strictly prescribed and limited. The board is required by law to accept the highest scoring proposal unless the highest scoring proposal is disqualified for impropriety or some other change in circumstance that was unavailable for evaluation by the evaluation committee. Impropriety would mean that the highest scoring offeror has engaged in some type of unlawful or unethical behavior in presenting their proposal to the evaluation committee, that there was some type of violation of the procurement code throughout this process, or that the proposal violates some portion of the request for proposals that the Division of Wildlife Resources and Utah State Purchasing provided online for conservation organizations to evaluate. A change of circumstance would be something such as an offeror's a change in status that affects an offeror's ability to carry out the promises that they've made as part of their proposal. An example of this might be an organization has gone bankrupt or no longer operates in Utah or something to that effect. But really the board's authority is tightly restricted and tightly regulated by the procurement code. And your role today is not to second guess the subjective decisions that were made by the evaluation committee. It's more to ensure that the process that the evaluation committee used followed the procurement code, and there are no odd issues that have popped up in between the time when the evaluation committee made their decision and today's decision-making process. By procurement code, you do have the authority to cancel the proposal process. However, if you do that, please be advised that that, in a sense, means that you are canceling the program as a whole. You cannot cancel this proposal process in an effort to redirect or steer the contract to a different conservation organization, or to shortly suspend the program in order to reinitiate the RFP process and get a different offeror selected. The board really doesn't have authority to reevaluate the subjective decisions made by the evaluation committee, and your discussion today needs to be limited to those very narrow topics that are provided for in code. So please be cautious in your discussions today, and Kirk, I guess if you have any questions, please let us know.
Mike standing up is.
I apologize, I forgot to mention one important thing. Our committee created a detailed justification statement where we went through each of the criteria, discussed the strengths and weaknesses of each proposal in that criterion, and gave our score and justified it for each of the criterion. The board has a copy of that justification statement. That will be posted online by the Division of Purchasing through the BidSync website this afternoon. And once it's posted there, we will also post it on the division's website so the public will have access to that justification statement and see the details. The actual proposals will be available after a contract is signed, but not until then. And they'll be available through a grammar request to the Division of Purchasing. They are technically not Division of Wildlife Resources records, but they can be requested from the Division of Purchasing. So I apologize that I forgot to mention that.
Thank you, Mike, for all of your efforts there. Greg, thank you very much. And Ann in the purchasing department, we'd like to recognize all of the hard work and effort there. This is very little compared to everything that you have gone through, so we appreciate that very much. With that, is there any discussion?
Just a question. There were 4 individuals on that selection committee from 4 different organizations. Okay.
Yeah. Just outline those in our last. Mm-hmm. Want to go over that again?
No, we don't need to know or care who was on that, who those people were. And that's probably not our information. It's probably not made public, is it, Mike?
Not by name, just by department.
Just by somebody from the governor's office.
Yes, that information is not public. I think people know I was the division representative. The other 3 names are not public. However, all 4 members were impartial. They had to sign a conflict of interest form and a confidentiality agreement.
Okay.
Any further discussion?
The only thing that we can do is accept or reject, or can't throw the whole thing out and tip it on its head. And okay.
Correct.
Okay.
Seeing no discussion, I'd entertain a motion.
Mr. Chairman?
Calvin?
Is that Mr. Chairman or Mr. Vice Chairman?
Vice Chairman.
Mr. Vice Chairman. I move we accept the proposal as presented. And it's not a division's proposal,
State purchasing.
the state purchasing, do we need to explain this, solicitation AS 16003 or just,
I think you just have.
okay, all right. Anyway, I would move that we would accept this proposal to award this as presented.
I have a motion. Do I have a second? Motion by Calvin, seconded by Donnie. Since we're short a quorum, without my vote, even though I'm acting as chairman, do I vote?
Yes, it is.
The queen of procedure says yes.
I've always had issues with that, thinking that the chairman never votes only in case of a tie. But if you look it up in Robert's Rules of Order, it is okay, and it is more than okay for the chairman to vote. And especially since you are part of that quorum, it would be.
We'll talk about that later, Calvin.
Have you ever read Robert's Rules?
Those
It's an interesting read. Let me tell you that. Don't do it at night when you're likely to fall
scares
asleep.
me a little bit,
It's
Calvin.
a little bit scary.
All those in favor?
Given our limited involvement and the restrictions that we have, I will go ahead and vote yes. But make note that we've had very little to do with this process.
I agree with that, Mike. That note is that we are limited. And I think that was pointed out by Mike and Greg both, that our role in this is very limited, and has been really nothing up to this point. And so this is just a vote to approve what has taken place with the purchasing, and allow those 200 tags to be distributed. So am I clear that you voted yes on that? Okay, so the vote is unanimous. At this point, the only other agenda item requires our chairman. Since this action item is finished, should we bring the board back to have that other action item? Or should I close the
That
meeting?
would be fine, but we need to collect the confidential materials first.
You want that because I made notes on it. They're not. Okay. Is this part of the, not necessarily part of the confidentiality? That's the proposal that went out to the world.
The RFP is not.
Okay. Just the information in that packet is confidential. Okay.
Thank you again, Mike, for all that you've done. Greg and Marty. Marty hasn't been up here today, but he has been very involved in the process. As the rest of the board members are coming back here, again, Ann and the purchasing department, thank you very much for everything that you've done here. And thank you for those of you that have submitted proposals. We appreciate your involvement in wildlife in Utah. Thank you very much for taking the time to be here and to spend all of the hours and hours that went into those proposals. Thank you very much for your work. With that, I'll turn the time back over to our chairman.
Thank you for doing a good job holding the fort down. I too just want to thank everybody that submitted proposals. I can't even begin to imagine the amount of time that went in on both sides, and appreciate the state purchasing and all those that were involved there being willing to contribute. So thank you very much. So with that, I'm not aware of any other business unless anybody from the division has anything. It's a Tuesday. Yeah, our next board meeting will be January 5th. That's a Tuesday. That will be the Bair proclamation and related items. That meeting will start at 9 o'clock. This one started at 10 because of the short agenda, but that one will start at 9. With that, I guess we'd entertain a motion to adjourn. All right. We good? All those in favor of adjournment and moving on? Okay. Pass unanimously, and this meeting is adjourned. Thank you.